The night did not fall suddenly. It arrived slowly, the way it always did in the desert, as if the land itself needed time to decide whether it was ready to let go of the day. The heat lingered even after the sun had slipped behind the horizon. Sand still held the memory of light, and the sky, wide and patient, began to darken not to black, but to a deep, quiet blue. Somewhere on that open plain, a single lamp was lit. Not a bright one, not meant to be seen from afar, just enough flame to tell a man where his hands were, to remind him that he was still awake. He adjusted the cloth around his shoulders, the fabric worn thin from years of travel. The day had been long, the kind of day that left the body tired, but the mind unwilling to sleep. Around him, the caravan was settling into its night shape. Camels knelt slowly, their joints folding with a sound like old wood. Bundles were lowered, ropes loosened. Someone murmured a short prayer, not loudly, not to be heard by others, but to mark the moment. This was how nights began on the Silk Road, not with stories or songs, but with small, careful movements, with quiet decisions made again and again, where to sit, where to place the fire, how close was too close, how far was too far. The man by the lamp had traveled this road before, not once, not twice, but enough times to know that the night was never the same twice. By day, the road looked simple, a line across the land, dust, stone, distance. But by night, the road became something else entirely. It became a collection of sounds, the soft ring of a bell tied to a camel's neck, the hiss of wind moving over sand, the faint crackle of fire. It became a place where thoughts grew louder. He watched the flame carefully. In the desert, fire was never taken for granted. It meant warmth, yes, but more than that, it meant time bought from the darkness. The Silk Road was not a single road. It never was. It was a habit, a decision repeated across generations, a willingness to move forward even when the night offered no promise of what lay ahead. Somewhere far to the east, silk had been woven by hands that would never know his name. Somewhere far to the west, coins would change hands in markets he would never see. And yet, here he was sitting between those worlds, guarding a small circle of light. The others in the caravan spoke little now. Words were for daylight, for bargaining and counting and arguing over distance. Night was for listening. He could hear the wind shift. That mattered. Wind told stories to those who learned to hear them. It spoke of weather changing, of sand moving, of danger or relief still hours away. He pulled his cloak tighter, not because he was cold, but because the body remembered vulnerability as soon as darkness took over. This was the hour when travelers thought of home. Not loudly, not with longing that burned, but with a gentle awareness, the memory of walls, of familiar voices, of nights that ended in the same place they began. Here, nights ended somewhere else. That was the unspoken rule of the Silk Road. Each morning meant leaving behind a place that had kept you alive through the dark. The lamp flickered. He leaned closer, shielding it with his hand, the skin rough and scarred from rope and trade and travel. Fire was a language everyone on the road understood. It said, Someone is awake. Someone is watching. Beyond the light, the desert waited. It did not threaten. It did not promise. It simply existed, vast, indifferent, older than memory. Stars began to appear, one by one, without hurry. In cities, stars were decorations. Here, they were maps. He traced them without moving his hand, following patterns he had learned not from books, but from men who had learned them from other men, sitting by other fires on other nights, much like this one. The Silk Road moved under these same stars long before anyone thought to give it a name. It moved when writing was rare. It moved when borders were uncertain. It moved because people needed things they could not make themselves. And so they walked. They rode. They waited out the night. The man wondered, briefly, how many others were awake at this very moment. How many lamps burned across the land, each one held by someone thinking similar thoughts about distance, about risk, about tomorrow. He did not know their names. He did not need to. The road connected them, whether they wished it or not. A camel shifted its weight. The bell rang once, softly. No one reacted. It was a familiar sound, one that meant life continuing as expected. He allowed himself to relax just a little. The night, for now, was calm. In the distance, far beyond the reach of the firelight, the road stretched on, invisible but real. It was not marked by stones or signs. It existed because people remembered it, because they told others, walk this way, avoid that valley, rest when the stars reach this point. Knowledge traveled like goods did, slowly, carefully, passed from mouth to ear, from night to night. He added a small piece of fuel to the fire. The flame grew, then settled. This was enough. Not too much light. Too much light attracted attention. Attention was never free. The Silk Road rewarded patience, not speed. Those who rushed often did not return. He leaned back, eyes half closed now, listening to the rhythm of breath around him. Men and animals bound together for the night by necessity rather than affection. Tomorrow they would move again. Tomorrow would bring heat, bargaining, movement. But now there was only this, a circle of light, a stretch of darkness beyond it, and a road that continued, whether seen or not. The first lamp of the night burned steadily, and somewhere far away another lamp answered it, not with light, but with the quiet certainty that the journey was still possible. The caravan did not move all at once. It never did. Movement on the Silk Road was a gradual agreement, a quiet understanding that passed from one body to another before any foot actually stepped forward. The man rose slowly, careful not to disturb the fire too much. Ash shifted, glowing faintly, then settled again. The night air felt cooler now, lighter against the skin, as if the desert itself had exhaled. Someone farther down the line tugged gently on a rope. A camel lifted its head. Another followed. There was no signal, no spoken command, only habit. Midnight was not a time measured by clocks out here. It was measured by the sky, by the way the stars leaned slightly westward, by the change in the wind's voice. The caravan preferred this hour. Traveling at night was slower, yes, but safer. The sun demanded water. The night asked only attention. The man took his place near the middle of the line, where the sound of bells overlapped just enough to hide any single mistake. Too far ahead, and you were alone. Too far behind, and you were forgotten. Here he belonged. The first steps were always the hardest. Muscles protested softly. Bones complained. But soon the rhythm returned. Step, shift, pause. The camels moved like memory itself, not fast, not graceful, but relentless. Each animal carried more than goods. They carried trust. A poorly tied bundle could mean loss. A loose strap could mean injury. And in the dark, even small errors grew large. The bells rang again gently, not as music, but as reassurance. As long as the bells sounded as expected, the road was still holding together. The man let his eyes drift upward for a moment. Stars stretched endlessly, unconcerned with the slow procession below. He wondered, as he often did, how many of these stars had watched similar caravans pass beneath them. How many men had stood where he stood now, feeling the same mix of caution and calm. History did not rush here. It walked. The wind brushed past his face, carrying a scent he could not name. Dust, leather, distant smoke. He listened carefully. Silence on the Silk Road was never empty. It was layered. There was the breathing of animals, the soft scrape of feet against sand, the occasional clink of metal hidden beneath cloth, and beneath it all the awareness of what could not be seen. Bandits rarely announced themselves, storms even less so. The man adjusted his grip on the strap across his chest, not because danger was certain, but because readiness was a form of respect for the road, for those traveling beside him. Ahead, the guide slowed. Not stopped, just enough to change the rhythm. The message traveled backward without words. Steps shortened. Spacing tightened. Something in the terrain had shifted. A dip, a stretch of softer sand. The Silk Road was not paved. It had moods. Tonight it felt cautious. The caravan passed through a shallow valley, the sound of bells briefly swallowed by the land itself. For a moment, the world seemed smaller, the sky farther away. Then, slowly, the space opened again. The man exhaled. He had learned long ago not to fight the road. Those who argued with it wasted strength. Those who listened lasted longer. Somewhere behind him, a traveler stumbled slightly. Hands reached out. Balance was restored. No comment followed. Mistakes were allowed as long as they were brief. This was not kindness. It was survival. Hours passed like this, unmarked, uncounted. The body adjusted. The mind drifted. Thoughts soft around the edges, losing urgency, becoming shapes rather than sentences. He thought of the cargo. Silk folded carefully, protected from moisture and friction. Spices sealed in leather, their scent restrained but persistent. Small objects, metal, glass, paper, each one insignificant alone, each one valuable because of distance. Distance was what gave everything meaning here. A thing was precious not for what it was, but for how far it had traveled. The man smiled faintly at that thought. He too was valuable, only because he moved. A stationary merchant was just a shopkeeper. A moving one was a bridge. The bells changed their tone slightly. The man noticed immediately. One animal had slowed. Not dangerously, but enough to be felt. The guide raised a hand. The caravan eased to a stop. No one complained. Stopping was part of moving. The camel's handler knelt, hands quick and practiced. A strap was adjusted, a load redistributed. The animal snorted softly, as if in agreement. Within minutes, the caravan resumed. Efficiency here was quiet. The night deepened. Stars brightened, sharper now, as if the sky had decided to pay closer attention. The man felt the familiar sensation return, the sense that the world existed only in two layers, the small circle of movement around him and the vast unknown beyond it. Everything else faded. This was why the road changed people. Not through danger alone, but through repetition. Night after night, the same careful walking, the same listening, the same trust placed in strangers. Trust was not emotional here. It was functional. You trusted the man beside you to hear what you could not. You trusted the guide to remember what you never learned. In return, you offered the same. The road demanded no more and no less. Far ahead, a faint glow appeared. Not firelight, not yet. Just a soft lifting of darkness near the horizon. The man felt a quiet relief. They were approaching a known rest point. Not a city, not even a true settlement. Just a place where others had stopped before. A place remembered. The caravan did not speed up. It never did. Anticipation was managed carefully here. Too much hope led to mistakes. As they drew closer, the glow resolved into shape, low walls, shadows of structures, the suggestion of shelter. A caravanserai. Still dark, still close to the night, but waiting. The man felt the night loosen its grip slightly. Not enough to relax completely, but enough to breathe. Soon they would rest. Soon the bells would fall silent. Soon the road would pause, but not yet. The last stretch was always watched most closely. Many things happened near safety. The caravan approached slowly, respectfully, as if announcing itself without sound. A gate creaked open. Lantern light spilled out, soft and controlled. The man stepped forward with the others, crossing from open darkness into shared space. Behind them, the road remained, unchanged, patient. It would be there when they left again. It always was. The caravan did not enter the inn loudly. Nothing on the Silk Road ever did. The gate closed behind them with a sound that was firm but not final. Wood meeting wood. A reminder that the night was still outside, waiting. Inside the walls, the air felt different. Not warmer, exactly. Not safer in any absolute way. Just contained. The man noticed it immediately, the way sound changed when it no longer disappeared into open space. Footsteps echoed faintly. Voices, even whispers, lingered a moment longer. This place had heard many of them. The caravanserai was older than most of the people who entered it. Its stones were worn smooth by hands and backs and burdens that had leaned against them for generations. No one knew who had built it first. That was not important. What mattered was that it stood. Animals were guided toward the inner courtyard, where water waited in shallow basins. Camels drank slowly, methodically, as if counting each swallow. Men loosened straps, stretched stiff shoulders, and spoke at last, not loudly, not yet. Conversation returned cautiously, like a limb tested after a long sleep. The man moved with practiced ease, finding a place near the wall where he could sit with his back supported and his view open. Position mattered here. He could see the gate. He could see the fire pit. He could see who came and went. It was not suspicion. It was habit. Inside the inn, strangers became temporary neighbors. There was a man from the north, his accent sharp, his clothes heavy for this climate. A pair of traders from farther east, speaking softly to each other, hands never far from their goods. A family, too, a rare sight, traveling with more hope than experience. The man watched them quietly. Children learned quickly on the road, or not at all. Someone added fuel to the central fire. Flames rose briefly, then settled into a steady glow. Light changed faces, lines softened. Eyes reflected warmth. For a moment, everyone looked more alike than they had under the open sky. This was the strange magic of the caravanserai. It did not erase difference. It merely suspended it. Water was shared first, a small courtesy, but never ignored. Hands passed cups. Nods replaced thanks. Words were exchanged only when necessary. Languages overlapped here in fragments, numbers, directions, prices. No one asked where you were going. That question carried too much weight. Instead, they asked simpler things. How far did you travel today? Is the next stretch clear? Did you see signs of weather? These were safe questions, useful ones. The man answered when spoken to, listened when others spoke. Information was a kind of currency. Too much of it was suspicious. Too little was dangerous. He removed his pack and leaned it against the wall, keeping it within reach. Inside were items worth more than the night's shelter, silk wrapped carefully. A pouch of spices, small objects meant to be traded again and again until distance transformed them into something rare. Distance always did the work. The family settled near the fire. The children stared openly, eyes wide, absorbing everything. The man caught one child's gaze and offered a faint smile. Not encouragement, just acknowledgement. The road did not belong to the fearless. It belonged to those who learned to be careful without becoming hard. Food appeared gradually. Flatbread, dried meat. Something warm passed from one traveler to another without ceremony. Eating here was not indulgence. It was maintenance. The body needed fuel just as surely as the fire did. Around the edges of the courtyard, men began to prepare their sleeping spaces. Blankets were unrolled, cloaks adjusted. No one lay fully flat. That was a habit left behind in safer places. Sleep on the Silk Road was a compromise. One eye closed, one ear open. The man leaned back, feeling the stone press coolly against his shoulders. He listened. Laughter rose briefly from one corner, then faded. Someone told a story quietly, not to entertain, but to explain something that had happened on the road earlier. Stories here were practical. They carried lessons disguised as memory. A man from the West spoke of a town where traders were taxed twice because no one remembered the agreement made the year before. The lesson was clear. Remember what others forget. Another spoke of a storm that had come without warning, trapping a caravan for days. The lesson there was different. Never assume the sky owes you clarity. The man closed his eyes for a moment, letting the voices blend into the background. This was the hour when the road felt most human, not moving, not threatening, just people gathered together because they needed the same things: water, rest, and the presence of others. Outside the walls, the desert remained unchanged. Inside, time slowed. He thought of the many nights like this one that had already passed. Different inns, different faces, the same patterns repeated. Arrive unburdened, rest, then leave. The Silk Road did not encourage attachment. It encouraged familiarity without expectation. You might see these people again, you might not. Either way, the road would continue. A guard appeared near the gate, lantern in hand. Not an authority, exactly. More a reminder. The inn was not free. It was maintained by presence, by someone willing to stay awake. The man respected that. He reached into his pouch and set aside a small payment, not yet given, but ready. Fair exchange kept places like this alive. As the night deepened, conversation thinned. Bodies surrendered little by little to rest. The family's children slept first, curled close together. Their parents stayed awake longer, watching the shadows. The man understood. Trust was easier to practice than to feel. The fire burned lower now. Someone adjusted it. Someone else didn't bother. At some point, responsibility passed without notice. This, too, was the road's way. The man shifted, finding a position that allowed him to rest without losing awareness. He had learned to sleep like this over years, never deeply, but enough. Before closing his eyes, he looked once more around the courtyard. Strangers, yes, but familiar in their need. Each one had arrived carrying the weight of distance. Each one would leave carrying it again. In between, there was this small pause, a held breath in the long sentence of the journey. The caravanserai did not promise safety. It offered something quieter, continuity, proof that others had passed this way before and would pass again. The man let his thoughts slow. The road would call them before dawn. It always did. But for now the walls held. The gate remained closed. And the night, kept at a respectful distance by stone and fire, waited patiently for its turn to return. Sleep came unevenly in places like this. Some bodies surrendered to it quickly, exhausted beyond resistance. Others hovered near its edge, never quite stepping inside. The man belonged to the second group. He lay still, eyes closed, breath slow and measured, appearing to rest. Inside, his thoughts continued their quiet movement. This was not worry in the dramatic sense, no racing heart, no sudden fear. It was calculation, the kind that never announced itself. On the Silk Road, sleep was rarely deep. Deep sleep belonged to cities, to rooms with doors that locked from the inside, to places where tomorrow looked much like today. Here, tomorrow depended on too many things. He listened to the sounds of the inn. Someone shifted in their blanket. Leather creaked softly. A camel exhaled, long and patient. Each sound was catalogued without effort, not because he expected danger, but because ignoring sound felt irresponsible. Merchants learned this early. A man who slept too deeply often woke too late. The fire had burned down to embers now, its warmth lingering without its light. Shadows grew longer, more ambiguous. In the half-dark, objects lost their certainty. A bundle could look like a person. A person could disappear into stillness. The man opened his eyes briefly, letting them adjust. Across the courtyard, another merchant sat upright, awake for the same reasons. They did not acknowledge each other. There was no need. Shared vigilance did not require conversation. He thought of the goods resting beside him. They were quiet, patient, unaware of their own value. Silk that would one day rest on shoulders that had never known sand. Spices that would flavor meals in places where winter lasted longer than memory. Each item carried risk, not because it was precious, but because others knew it was. The Silk Road taught a simple truth. Value attracted attention. Attention attracted trouble. And so merchants learned to be careful without appearing afraid. The man remembered his first journey. How he had slept too lightly then, every sound sharp, every shadow suspicious. Experience softened that edge. Not into carelessness, but into rhythm. He knew now which sounds belonged to the night, and which did not. The quiet cough of a sleeper was harmless. The scrape of metal against stone was worth noticing. Tonight, everything sounded as it should. Still, sleep did not deepen. Thoughts drifted instead. He thought of agreements made earlier that day. Prices discussed, promises implied but not spoken aloud. Trade was rarely finished at the moment of exchange. It extended into memory, into expectation. A merchant carried his deals with him, replaying them in the dark, wondering if he had spoken too soon or waited too long. The man adjusted his cloak, covering his chest more fully. Vulnerability felt closer at night. Not because danger was greater, but because the mind had fewer distractions. In daylight, movement demanded attention. At night, thoughts filled the space. He considered the route ahead, a stretch of open desert. Then hills. Then, if fortune held, another inn like this one. Routes were chosen carefully, but certainty was never guaranteed. A dried riverbed could become impassable. A local ruler could change his mind. A rumor could prove true. The Silk Road was a negotiation with uncertainty. Merchants learned not to fight that. Instead, they learned to travel lightly in the mind, even when their packs were heavy. Somewhere a man whispered a prayer, not loudly, just enough to hear himself say it. Faith traveled the road as quietly as goods did. Different words, different gestures. The same hope beneath them. The man did not pray aloud, not because he lacked belief, but because his practice had become internal. He trusted preparation more than pleading. Still, he acknowledged the night with a brief moment of gratitude for walls, for water, for the fact that nothing had gone wrong so far. Gratitude on the Silk Road was practical. It did not assume permanence. Time passed without marking itself. This was the longest part of the night, the stretch when rest was possible, but never complete, when the body hovered between states, ready to wake at the slightest change. The man drifted, then surfaced again. Dreams formed and dissolved before taking shape. He saw fragments, markets, faces, hands exchanging goods, but they carried no story, just movement. Eventually the night shifted, not toward morning yet, but toward something thinner. The darkness felt less heavy, as if it had reached the end of its strength. A merchant rose quietly, careful not to wake others, and moved toward the gate. He was not leaving, just checking. This, too, was common. The man watched through half-closed eyes as the gate was unbarred slightly, then secured again. All was well. That knowledge settled over the courtyard like an extra blanket. The man allowed himself to rest more fully now. Not deeply, but enough. This was the balance merchant sought, sleep that refreshed without dulling the senses. Those who mastered it lasted longer on the road. As the night edged closer to dawn, thoughts grew simpler. Tomorrow's concerns waited patiently. For now the road paused. The man's breathing slowed. Around him others found the same fragile rest, bound together not by trust, but by shared caution. The Silk Road did not lull people to sleep. It taught them how to rest without forgetting where they were. And in that lesson many learned something quieter still, that vigilance practiced gently could coexist with peace. The embers glowed faintly. The walls held. And the merchants, sleeping lightly, remained ready for whatever morning would bring. Morning had not arrived yet, but the night had begun to loosen. It was subtle, a change felt more than seen. The man sensed it before opening his eyes. The darkness no longer pressed so firmly. The air felt thinner, as if the world were preparing to move again. He remained still. This hour belonged neither to sleep nor to travel. It was a narrow space between, a pause where thoughts moved freely without demanding attention. Around him the inn rested in fragments. Some still slept. Others stirred quietly, careful not to disturb what little rest remained. The man's thoughts drifted, not toward danger or calculation this time, but toward memory. He thought of the things he carried, not the silk itself, not the spices or metal or glass. Those were only the visible parts of the journey. What truly moved along the Silk Road could not be weighed or counted. It moved in conversation, in imitation, and small habits picked up and carried onward without anyone noticing when they had begun. He had seen it happen many times. A man learned to boil water longer after watching another do it at an inn like this one. A trader adjusted the way he wrapped cloth after seeing how it survived rain on a distant route. Someone learned a new word, used it once, then again, until it no longer felt foreign. This was how the road worked. Goods changed hands quickly. Knowledge lingered. The man remembered the first time he had seen paper, not as a curiosity, but as a solution. lighter than parchment, easier to carry. At first he had not understood its importance. It looked fragile, temporary. But then he saw what it allowed: lists, agreements, records that survived distance better than memory alone. Paper traveled quietly. No one announced it. And yet it changed everything. Spices did the same. Not just flavor, but preservation. A way to keep food longer. A way to endure. Someone learned that here, shared it there, and suddenly winters felt shorter. The Silk Road was full of such moments, small exchanges that reshaped lives far from their origin. The man had once watched a craftsman from the West study a piece of glass brought from the East, not to buy it, just to understand it. Months later, he saw similar glass in a market many days' travel away. No one credited the road. They never did. The road did not demand recognition. It simply connected. The inn stirred more now. A pot was set near the embers, water warming slowly. The sound was familiar. A faint shift, a soft promise. The man sat up, stretching carefully. His body reminded him of distance traveled, of nights rested lightly, of mornings begun without certainty. He welcomed the sensation. It meant he was still moving. Across the courtyard, the family was awake. The children watched everything with open curiosity, absorbing the world as if it were a lesson meant only for them. The man wondered what they would carry forward. Not goods, not roots, but impressions. The way strangers shared space, the sound of many languages blending without conflict, the understanding that the world was wider than any single home. Those lessons traveled well. Someone spoke quietly nearby, explaining the use of a tool to someone who had never seen it before. Hands demonstrated, nods followed. No record was kept, yet the knowledge would continue. The man realized, as he often did, that he himself was part of the cargo. His experiences, his habits. Everywhere he went, he carried traces of other places, ways of measuring distance, of judging weather, of recognizing honest trade. He passed these on without intention. The road made teachers of everyone. Outside the walls, the desert waited. Inside, the quiet exchange continued. The man drank warm water slowly, feeling it settle. He thought of cities he had visited that believed themselves to be centers of the world. Each one thought the road ended there. It never did. The Silk Road did not lead to destinations. It passed through them, and in doing so it changed them in ways they rarely noticed. Beliefs softened, customs adapted. People learned that there were many ways to greet a stranger, to pray, to rest. None of them were final. The man gathered his things as the inn came fully awake, not hurried, not delayed. Movement returned gently, as it always did. He felt a quiet respect for the road at moments like this. Not admiration, not romance, respect. It asked much, but it gave something difficult to find elsewhere, a sense of continuity beyond borders. As the caravan prepared to leave, the man took one last look around the courtyard. By tonight, this place would hold different faces, different goods, but the same patterns would repeat: water shared, knowledge exchanged. distance bridged. He stepped forward with the others, carrying more than he had arrived with. Not in weight, but in understanding, the gate opened, light shifted, and once again the Silk Road accepted what it always carried best, not silk, not spice, but the quiet movement of human knowledge from one night to the next. The road did not ask what a man believed. It never had. It only asked whether he could walk, whether he could listen, whether he could wait. As the caravan moved again, leaving the inn behind, the man felt that familiar, quiet return, the kind that came not from silence, but from understanding. The desert welcomed them without ceremony. No walls now, no gate, only open space and the steady rhythm of movement. By the time night returned in full, small fires appeared once more along the line. Not one great flame, but many modest ones. Each traveler kept his light contained, not to hide, but to respect the darkness around him. Firelight revealed small differences. A man knelt facing one direction, his movements slow and practiced. Another traced a symbol near his chest before settling down. Someone murmured words that belonged to no language the man understood, and yet none of it felt strange. On the Silk Road, belief traveled the same way goods did, quietly, side by side. No one argued over whose words reached higher. The night did not reward such effort. Faith here was personal, practical. It helped a man endure distance. It gave shape to uncertainty. The man had seen arguments elsewhere, in cities, in courts, in places where people stayed long enough to build walls around their ideas. Out here, belief softened, not weakened, just made lighter. A man prayed. Another listened to the wind. Both hoped for the same thing, that the road ahead would remain passable. The fire crackled gently. The man sat close enough to feel its warmth, far enough to keep his thoughts his own. He remembered nights when he had tried to explain his customs to others. It rarely mattered. Understanding on the Silk Road came less from explanation and more from observation. You watched how someone treated animals, how they shared water, how they reacted when plans changed. Those things revealed more than any spoken belief. Stars watched overhead, indifferent to doctrine. They had seen every faith pass beneath them, rise, change, merge. The man found comfort in that. It reminded him that certainty was not required to continue. Nearby, two travelers spoke quietly. One described a festival from his homeland, full of light and sound. The other listened, smiling faintly, imagining it without needing to see it. No judgment followed, no correction. Stories did not compete here. They accumulated. The road made collectors of stories rather than defenders of truth. The man leaned back, eyes following the slow arc of the sky. Firelight flickered, turning faces into temporary shapes. For a moment, everyone looked like travelers first and believers second. This, he realized, was the road's quiet gift. Not unity, but coexistence. The ability to share space without demanding agreement. As the night deepened, rituals faded into rest. Words ended, gestures concluded. What remained was breathing, human and animal, rising and falling together. The man allowed his thoughts to slow again. He felt the weight of distance behind him and the unknown ahead. Between them lay this narrow present, firelight, sand, stars. He thought of how many borders he had crossed without noticing. Not lines drawn on maps, but habits left behind, assumptions adjusted. The Silk Road did not erase identity. It reshaped it gently, night after night. Somewhere in the darkness a traveler whispered a final prayer. Somewhere else another simply watched the flames. The night accepted both. The fire burned low. The man wrapped his cloak tighter, settling into a posture that allowed rest without surrender. He felt no urgency now. Morning would come when it was ready. The road would continue as it always had, and under the same stars, among many beliefs and quiet fires, the journey held together, not by agreement, but by shared motion through the dark. The night thinned slowly, not into morning yet, but into something gentler, a suggestion of light, too faint to name. The man felt it before he saw it, the way the air shifted, the way the dark loosened its hold. This was the hour the Silk Road knew best. Neither night nor day, neither rest nor movement, a moment suspended between what had been and what would come next. He rose quietly, the body remembering what to do without instruction. Around him, others did the same. Not together, not in unison, but with the same unspoken understanding. It was time. Fires were reduced, not extinguished, left as small promises for those who might pass later. The road was generous that way. It never belonged to one caravan alone. As they prepared to move, the man looked once more at the line of travelers. Different faces, different languages, the same posture, shoulders angled forward, eyes already measuring distance. He had walked beside many like them over the years. Some disappeared from the road quietly, choosing to stop, to settle, to let movement become memory. Others vanished suddenly, claimed by storms, illness, or decisions made too quickly. The road remembered them all, even when no one else did. As the caravan began to move, the bells rang softly again, a sound older than cities, older than borders. It did not announce progress, it simply marked continuity. The man walked. Step by step, he felt the familiar rhythm return. This time, his thoughts did not linger on danger or trade. They moved outward instead, toward the larger shape of things. He thought of places where the Silk Road was said to have ended. Ports where ships replaced camels. Cities where warehouses stood where caravanserais once had. People spoke of decline, of disappearance. The man had learned better. The road did not vanish. It learned new forms. Movement changed its tools, but not its purpose. Where silk once traveled by hand and hoof, ideas now moved faster, lighter, almost invisible. Goods crossed oceans, messages crossed continents. Still, the pattern remained. Someone made something. Someone far away needed it. Between them lay distance and the human effort to bridge it. The Silk Road had taught that lesson long ago. It was never about luxury. It was about connection. The man imagined future travelers who would never see the desert, never hear the bells, never feel the weight of sand in their boots. They would still know the road, even if they called it something else. trade routes, networks, lines on glowing maps. Different words, the same impulse. As light grew slowly at the horizon, the stars began to fade. One by one, without ceremony, they had done their work. The man felt a quiet gratitude for them, not for guidance, but for perspective. They reminded travelers that the world was vast and that no journey needed to be rushed. The caravan continued. Ahead lay more nights, more inns, more quiet exchanges. Behind lay countless footsteps already softened by time. The man understood now why the road never truly left him. It was not a place. It was a way of moving through uncertainty with patience, a way of accepting that arrival was always temporary. As the first true light touched the land, shadows shortened. The desert revealed itself again, not hostile, not welcoming, simply present. The man adjusted his pace, matching the others. There was no need to hurry. The road would wait. It always did. And somewhere, long after this caravan passed, another traveler would light a small lamp against the dark, not knowing his name, not needing to, continuing the same quiet agreement that had carried people forward for centuries. The Silk Road did not end. It only learned how to move unseen. The bells rang softly. The horizon widened, and the journey, unremarkable and extraordinary all at once, continued into the light and beyond it.